the way in which these LLMs are sort of inherently text-based makes them really biased toward long-form text output in ways that is just really unnatural for spoken, specifically task-based dialogue.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Deep Learning with PolyAI. Today, I've got Oliver Shoulson, who is one of our original dialogue designers and a guy that I've had many amazing conversations with over the years, and he's taught me a lot. And we'll talk about some of the things that we had kind of like worked on, but we're here to talk about dialogue designs, anthropomorphism, and whether an AI should say it's human or not, and what putting an LLM as this kind of like main constituent part of its brain does to the flow of the conversation. So Oliver, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
It's good to see you. And I think like when we discussed talking about this and this episode, we kind of like I think immediately went back to the kind of like wonderfully formatted kind of like LaTeX paper where there was just stuff around like should an AI say it's human or not, and all the research we've done beforehand on it. So maybe we can start with just kind of like the broad strokes of like that discussion and see where it takes us.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is a topic that we did a fair amount of like in-house research on in the sort of the pre-LLM days, where this question of, should a bot introduce itself as a bot? Should we give it a human-like name? Should we give it a name that's sort of not human-like, like your classic like Siri or, something that sort of lets you know that it's like a special kind of entity, not a human. And we did a fair amount of research on this to see how this impacted user behavior, call outcomes, things like that. Because, I think there's a lot of fear when you're building and designing virtual assistants that if you tell people it's a robot, that's just going to immediately trigger all of the past terrible experiences they've had with like terrible IVRs. And you're going to immediately say representative, like, hand me off. And we do see that a significant effect in terms of first turn handoff requests when you introduce the agent as a voice assistant, either calling it a virtual agent, mentioning AI, not mentioning AI. When these studies were conducted, it was actually kind of right when ChatGPT was originally being rolled out. So we were kind of interested to see like, is this news making it to people that there are suddenly now these much more capable AI agents on the market? And what we find is that while there are effects on sort of in that first turn on the frequency that people ask to be transferred to a human representative, that through clever design and by trying to win people's engagement back, we actually see no statistically significant differences in call outcomes at all, in terms of like what proportion of people are we able to contain within the system. Our customer satisfaction is the same, if not a little bit better, when we are upfront about being a virtual assistant. So it's kind of this is one of those interesting design challenges where it's like we know that we're going to encounter some people who, for one reason or another, are reluctant to interact with an AI. And how do we sort of demonstrate our capabilities to them and win back their engagement? And in doing so, we find that we can mitigate a lot of those negative results.
Yeah, I remember the civil wars we had internally about, should you say it's a human or not? Then, I think what we're known for is just like the branded experiences, voice actors that we pull into a studio, work with them for days, and then clone a voice that sounds exactly the way you want it to.
Mhm.
Like we took that to an art form before others had access to better TTS engines, right? This mattered. It was at the very kind of like core of the product, right? And there were people who strongly advocated that the voice itself should be quite robotic, that otherwise you're entering the uncanny valley. Then I think, there was brilliant moniker of like, we're not trying to trick you into thinking it's a human. We're trying to help you forget that it's a machine. And I think that's something that the whole team really rallied around. And then when we did that work, it just really got me just how the one thing that mattered, I remember, was you can't make a big deal out of it being AI, right? Because I think the historical bad experiences start with the whole, I am Nikola, PolyAI's voice agent. You can talk to me in natural sentences, and you can use normal expressions that you would in daily conversations. If at any point you want to speak to a human, just say human. And at that point, you're like, okay,
Yeah.
that is like shooting yourself in the foot at the start of a, 19th century duel, and you should not do that. But I think like, once we were doing like this testing, everything else was really a minor variation that
Yeah.
was almost inconsequential.
And what we see also is that once you get past that first turn, that first interaction, the effects of basically anything that you say on the first turn diminish turn to turn throughout the rest of the conversation. So if
Yeah.
you can get two, three, four turns into the conversation, the way that you introduced yourself has zero effect on anything, basically, by that point.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because I think at that point, like they're already invested in the interaction. So
yeah,
either they
exactly.
believe you can help them or not, right? Yeah. And then, okay, I think like the next pivotal point is the LLM, right? Like people start using ChatGPT more, they realize its capabilities, but it produces a lot of text. And I mean, like maybe just over to you, like if the system is LLM powered, especially by something like OpenAI, what happens?
Yeah, I mean, with voice agents, this is really interesting because, and this is something I went on a lot about the last time I was on this podcast, but like the way in which these LLMs are sort of inherently text-based makes them really biased toward long-form text output in ways that is just really unnatural for specifically task-based dialogue, where two people are trying to to go through a transaction together, to traverse a transaction together, they're trying to be cooperative. Um, that those sort of long form text outputs feel really unnatural, and they have a way of diminishing the sense of actually being with another person, which is really crucial when you're collaborating on a task. um, One thing I like to point out is that these the over explanatory nature of LLMs and the way that they're very verbose, like this is a feature, not a bug. Because LLMs generate text, one token at a time in this sort of linear way, they're trained in many cases to explain what they're doing at every step, because that actually improves the reliability and consistency of their outputs. It helps connect, point A of their response to point B of their response, which could be many bits of text or token later. So they're designed to do this. But that means that when you're plugging one into a voice assistant, there's a lot of work to be done to actually mitigate some of those negative, like text-oriented habits that they have.
Yeah, because I mean, like put simply, you're used to skimming through it and ignoring it, right?
Yeah,
And I think I mean, do you use voice mode on ChatGPT?
a little sometimes, to be honest. Like even I get a little creeped out by it.
Really?
Yeah.
Creeped out in what?
I'm maybe it's that there's too much social presence there. It's like really I feel like I'm being with another person, in a way that feels I don't know if uncanny valley is the right word, because the degree of familiarity is like pretty high. Um, and it's like I feel like I'm policing my behavior in a way that when I'm talking to my Alexa, I can be a little bit curt with
Because
her.
you're not really talking, you're issuing commands and praying they work with
Yeah.
Alexa, right? I think have you noticed this thing when people like share their screen and they want to show their chat GPT? It's almost like a bit of a boomer thing now where it's like you see their search history
Yeah,
and they're not always aware of it. It tells you a lot about a person. It's
it
almost
does.
like
Yeah.
a snapshot. It's like, oh, this person's like looking at things about like this health issue. Clearly, they've got a confidence issue with X, right? Or whatever. Like, it's just really, really interesting. But I think like um, I was to reveal a bit of my own kind of like personal side. I use a lot of voice mode. I use it nonstop. Like, and it started with because of what we do, but then really it's practical. And my wife decided that I am to start grilling, right? So she bought me a charcoal grill, not the one with like gas and stuff. It's like charcoal, and I'm not very good at it, right? So voice mode on, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
thin burger, how long? This, when? Over the hot side or not? Like when? Okay, this looks bad. This is not hot enough yet. It's starting to burn. What do I do? And the one thing that's like really interesting is like I think for the first 5 minutes my wife was entertained by my like, vicious opinionated usage of this thing where I'm like, no, stop, shorter sentences. This is like Jesus Christ. Like when AI takes over, you're gonna be among the first. I was like, no, I won't because I'm like I'm engaging, unlike the rest of you. But it's like um you need to be extremely opinionated about how you want it. Because like I'm like, I don't need oh I got it. That's totally the right way to I was like, no, stop. Like, no, like 150 or 200 degrees or what? Quickly. I was like, no fluff. Okay, I'll be more curt. And then like it got into like a vibe that I was okay with. It's still just like won't stop talking. Like it
Yeah.
sends so verbose, and like it hinges on like spitting out tokens on a screen fast enough that you like kind of like scan it and have attention over the things that matter most. But even when I use it as text, like it pisses me off that I can't just interrupt easily there. So with voice, that's actually more natural,
Yeah.
but it makes for quite a weird interaction where you have to be an active interrupter in a way that you never would with another human.
Yeah.
And yeah, after a certain time, I think 10 minutes later, I'm there like sweating and, I didn't set anything on fire. My wife's like, "Are you done talking to your girlfriend there?" I'm like, the one key thing that Apple hasn't given them is an ability to say, stop listening. You go, stop listening, it's still listening, right?
Mm.
And I'm just like, I'll say, like, hey, ChatGPT again, if I had to. You can't yet. You could start it through Siri, but the fact that you can't stop it was genuinely the reason that I then was like, okay, as I take out the Gorilla Glove, do I like for another thing or do I not? I'm just gonna chance it. So like the UX is getting there, but I feel like I am not a representative. I'm a power user, and this is just a weird thing. But I'm surprised you're not using it more. It's like
Yeah.
Sean would have mandated
Yeah, I
now.
mean, maybe I should give it. I should give it more of a chance. But I mean, the grilling example you gave is such a potent example of like two people engaging in a task-based
Yeah,
cooperative dialogue where it's doing exactly these things that can be so irritating with robots that humans don't do, which is that there's so much presupposition, so many ways that we like implicitly index other parts of the conversation, and don't make them explicit. And every response or every question that your co-interlocutor produces is assumed to be toward a mutual goal that you have and doesn't require that additional explanation. And again, these language models are trained to be over-explanatory because it helps with their predictability. It helps you as the user understand the relationship between your prompt and what it output. But it's not the way that humans do things. I don't. If we're working on setting up a grill together or building a piece of IKEA furniture or something, I'm not going to tell you on every turn, okay, in order to attach the legs, now you need to put these screws in. I'm just going to say, all right, next you should put
sure.
these screws
Yeah,
in. Because it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
it's like we understand what we're trying to do. We're trying to build an IKEA desk. We're trying to grill some burgers. And yeah, so I think that
yeah,
really gets to the heart of the issue of plugging in LLMs to these kinds of use cases.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, look, I think that that whole like task-oriented thing, like the way that they could be a lot better is by injecting that context, right? And I feel like it's not that they forget. That would be like criticizing the model, and the model is very powerful. I think it's more just like how the context is passed and orchestrated. And at the end of the day, it's probably like a bit of legal liability as well, where they're just very careful to not be opinionated or, like they have to qualify everything so that you end
Take
up.
anything for granted. Yeah, yeah.
Where do you think it goes longer term? And I think that like um you've had a lot of experience with implementing LLMs, first off with kind of like OpenAI's models, now with our own. Kind of like, why is it important to have your own LLM, or is it?
Um, well, I mean, I think that one of the most amazing things about having the in-house LLM that's specifically trained to work really well within our own proprietary tech stack and control layer is what's really the key there, which is that like you can plug a GPT LLM, an OpenAI LLM into our Agent Studio, and it will be fine. But it's not like specifically trained and fine-tuned to like know exactly what kind of prompting it's going to receive and like what kind like how it should behave in response to that prompting. So that's a really cool thing about having the in-house LLM. There's also just that we get to then fine-tune it and train it to specifically counteract some of these more like less cooperative, not speech-oriented tendencies. Things like being too verbose, over-explanatory. Things like failing to reference the speech participants in ways that humans very naturally do. Saying things like, "Could you read me your account number?" instead of please provide your account number, right? Like these kinds of subtle bits of syntax, of grammar that appear in human dialogue where that actually let the speech participants be encoded into the language in ways that like LLMs are kind of, I would guess, are kind of trained not to do because um, they're meant
That
to be
is,
sort of
that is such a good point. It reminds me of another conversation we had. If you remember, when we looked at a Hebrew implementation, and it was like, I need to know your gender
Yeah.
to see like what is like the way that it's like right at the end. Like that was just like an example of like, okay, like best off using third party passive. What is the value of this? Not like when did you
Yeah, yeah,
do
yeah.
right? And another one like in Serbian, right? Like as well. Um, you can get out of a lot of linguistic trouble by using like formal tenses where use plural instead of like gendered endings of verbs and stuff. But yeah, that's such a good point. Although all of that is doable technically, especially with like a consumer-oriented model that knows a lot about you, right?
Yeah, and maybe also as like we get better with these like direct speech to speech kind of real time models, it will have the ability to like take a guess at how it should be conjugating your gender in ways that we can't currently when there's like an ASR layer in between.
Yeah.
Um, though, I mean, I guess like with this happens on the phone all the time. Like I don't have the deepest voice in the world. Like I'm sure I've been called ma'am over the phone before, and that kind of thing happens. So
Yeah, that's
that risk as well.
I think I went through like a very serious heavy metal phase when I was like 13, 14, and there was an older Serbian woman in a bus was like, "Sorry, girl, could I have that seat?" And I looked at her. I was like, "Of course." Went into the first hairdresser, and like near shaving my head.
Uh,
So happens in many shapes and forms. But I think when you just think of like the use of these LLMs and like how they need to evolve as you prompt and others prompt around their kind of like current limitations, what like annoys you the most in a daily like kind of like workflow implementing an LLM powered agent for on behalf of enterprises?
I think it really is these just sort of like, as someone who cares very deeply about the user experience and about like, and knows that both from a usability standpoint and from this sort of social presence standpoint, which has these kind of mushier positive impacts, things like trust in the system and satisfaction and advice adherence, likelihood
Yeah.
to adhere to the advice of the agent, like these little quirks of persona of speech style are really hard to prompt out of them. And like one example that I spent a whole afternoon trying to find the prompting for is like doing a step-by-step walkthrough where what if you tell an LLM to walk through someone, changing their account password step by step, after every single step, it will prompt the user for confirmation or prompt them to tell them that they're ready for the next step. Like this is not how humans do this. Like if I was
Yep.
walking you through, I would say, first go to your account page and then I'm done
Yep.
talking.
Yep.
I know that you're going to tell me when you're there. Like I don't have to be like, let me know when you're ready for the next step. But what LLMs will do is go to your account page and click account settings. Let me know when you're ready for the next step. And then you say, okay, I'm ready. And then it's like, okay, then go to your account details and click on change password. Let me know when you're there. Like this is so annoying. And it's something that they really want to do because again, they're trained to be this like text-based assistant kind of persona, not like a collaborative partner in accomplishing a task.
Like this really reminds me of you know, when I started, like, for example, my wife just come easily to me today. Her favorite, one of her jokes about me is that I sound like, I learned English from a book, which is, not that untrue, but it's like fancy words that non-native speakers that have spent a long time learning a language deeply without like immersion use. Similarly, like LLMs almost use this like written formal casual conversation, which is, oh, that's it, you got it. Da, da, da. I'm like, I don't need like pep help, like, so I'm like, if I whatever ever that and then that, oh, that's exactly right. You did that right. That's a good way to think of it. I was like, oh my God. I'm like, with every second, my life drains out of my body, and I lose trust in an ability to have a conversation that's not going
Wasn't
to
there
lead
a
to some.
period of like a few days where Grok was being like was being like supplicatory and was like telling everyone like you're the smartest person in the world, like amazing, good. There was like a period where Grok.
So I don't use it much, right? I think I got a subscription at the point where someone said, well, they said that they were the best, and I tried it out, and I think the deep research mode was very good at the time, but I've not like continued to evaluate. When they released those voice avatars, there was like, I think like the inappropriate Rudy version, which was this like red squirrel they just swore back at you and like offended you greatly. Where I'm like, well, at least it's like an interesting unhinged model, right? Funnily, it was so funny and stupid and like 12-year-old in spirit that honestly I don't think it would lead to any self-harm other than like laughter and like, well, lack of usage because it wasn't that good. But yeah, I don't know what they were really trying to achieve there other than like maybe, they were doing it for the lulz. Have you used many of these? Like what do you use in your daily life in terms of kind of like which LLM?
I'm using mostly GPT, OpenAI. It's just what I have a subscription to, though. I for coding, the Claude models are really good. Um,
Yeah.
um, I like I sort of I'm curious to know a little more about what's going on behind the hood, under the hood of the like thinking and fast GPT-5 models, and like how it decides to, uh, when you set it to auto, like how it decides to think longer about certain questions. But
Sure.
generally,
I think like yeah,
I've been
it
very
feels very
GPT-5.
handcrafted, right?
Hmm?
It feels very handcrafted, and I think that
Yeah.
there's a part where it just like triggers one of them. It's just a classifier. I was hoping they would unify it. I was in awe of like the whole like four is out, we're gonna use five, and we're gonna make it good. And I think OpenAI is famous for their like work tempo and dealing with pressure. They caved in here, and I'm not sure that that's a decision they're gonna look back on fondly because
Hmm.
backpropagate. The spirit of deep learning is through data, one model, backpropagate, force yourself to grow and the UX to improve. And they've kind of chickened out, and now it's just like this, like a toolkit with 20 different things. And yeah, maybe it's selected, maybe it's not. They've already allowed a lot of power users to opt out and use 4.0 or different models. And like that just means linear growth on many fronts. And that's a real shame. I feel like it was I remember I was one of the OpenAI launch parties where Ilya Sutskever was telling me that, my approach to deep learning research was almost well, cowardly because there was structure in how the model would be structured and learn rather than, just one model data and like let it rip. And, it stuck with me because the guy told everyone exactly what he's going to do and how he's going to get there, and he did. And now I feel like with the whole like divergence of multiple models, they've kind of gone towards like it's like this massive toolbox and there's everything in it, but the discovery problem is you don't know what it can do. So
Yeah.
if one it improves, like the time it takes for everyone to figure out how to use it is gonna be exponentially longer, and that's just a shame.
Hmm. How do you find, do you ever interact with, like in voice mode, do you ever interact in Serbian with it? Or are you only use
All the
English?
all the time,
Oh, yeah.
and it's uncanny, right? So the flip is very good. The voice is phenomenal.
Wow.
There's dialectic ability where I'm like, all right, like, you know, I would gently flip towards more like say the way my like grandparents from like a Serbian part of Croatia would speak, and they would like gently interweave a different dialect. Like
Wow.
it's basically how like the old Slavic yat turned into like e or ija, whatever. So it's like mleko is mlijeko or mleko, and I would suddenly just flip a few words, and over time I would start flipping them. But then, and it's like if you can follow dialect implicitly you can just like flip it and be like, all right, like, you say like a few words that are by vocabulary Croatian, not Serbian, and then it will like flip to more of a like Zagreb rather than a Belgrade sounding thing. It is incredible, right? And it just shows you how much data has been trained on and what's implicitly gone into the parameters. And whenever we think like, do we need smaller models? Do we need all that? I'm like, there's some massive part of that brain that has like, a big part of the parameters dedicated to like the 100 kilometers of region in former Yugoslavia make the difference, right? And it's scarily good. Like it's not perfect, but like about 6 to 12 months ago, it was making grammatical errors that it doesn't make at all now. So
Yeah, that's
I
so
think
interesting
probably
because I just recently sent I had GPT translate something into Italian, for a project I was doing, and then I sent it to one of our Italian dialogue designers to just like to look it over, and she was like, "This is way too literal. Like this is not how people talk." I was really surprised that it gave me a bad Italian translation. Um, um,
but what was the right context provided, right? Because I think like there, it's again like, I think it's quite easy, and I think there are a lot of like mockingbirds out there who are like, haha, I did that, and I'm like, man, it's like able to rewrite it in like Serbian 19th century epic poetry style things that I know most human beings are incapable of. So ridiculing the fact that one thing there ends in the wrong like ending or something, it feels to me like we're like missing the bigger point of like, yeah, the world's changing.
Right. Well, I mean, it feels like given the volume of data that was fed into it, it sure as hell better be able to do some of this stuff.
Yeah.
It sure as hell better be able to do things that humans can't do, if considering the amount of data it consumed would take like 100 million years for a human to consume.
All right. So maybe like just kind of like drawing it to a close. In 5 years' time, you call the companies and systems are running, ideally mostly powered by us, but what's the like UX outlook of that agent? Does it tell you it's AI? Do you just know because most of it is? Like, how does it greet you?
I think I've heard you uh, talk about the idea that has stuck with me for a while, and I don't know if you still support this of like having a separate ringtone that like lets you know in advance if it's going to be an AI agent, and that way it doesn't like interrupt the flow of the conversation at all. But there's just like general literacy out there about like what this means, what that means. I think in general, so many of the problems we're seeing around AI and like both in terms of the actual harms that it causes in society and also in terms of negative user experiences people have interacting with it has to do with like literacy and understanding about like what these things are and what they can do and how they're doing what they're doing. And so if there's a greater degree of literacy and understanding around like, okay, this ringtone means like I'm going to be interacting with a large language model. I have experience doing that. I know sort of what the rules are of this conversation. Like we don't want people to be consciously thinking about that because that's what makes an
Yeah.
interaction frustrating. But like I think that that's a great way of doing things where like you don't interrupt the flow of the conversation, but there's sort of implicit understanding and consent there. Um, I think that they should like from the usability side, like I think feeling more human is important, not for its own sake. Like there's no we don't win any gold medals just for like making the most lifelike sounding agent. Like really I think
Yeah.
what we're talking about when we talk about a desire to make things lifelike and a desire to make things human is to make them usable. Like there's just a degree of affordances offered by human to human interaction
Yeah.
that it's still not offered by human computer interaction. And so we want to make systems that offer that same degree of affordances that can understand the density of information encoded in every single thing that you say and can
Yeah.
cooperatively respond to it. And so I think like that's really what we're looking for in the next few years of AI. And I think that will come with the sense of them feeling more lifelike and feeling more human, but again, not with that being the goal in its own right. It's the goal is to make them usable. The goal is to make them feel trustworthy and to be trustworthy in how we design them. And the goal is to
Yeah.
make them, um, yeah, people have good experiences interacting with them.
No, 100%. And I think, like the whole notion of like what they will be like in the end is they will be superhuman and that voice clearly dominates in a lot of these interactions still because we're better at expressing ourselves and we are taught from a young age to express ourselves with our voice. We're fast at it. It packs a lot of information. The
Yeah,
tone, the way you say it, the words you choose all really matter, right? And it's synchronous, it's instant. I think there is a part, and there's a lot of research that we look into and do ourselves on, like Gen Z especially, and Gen Z just because it's like the most well, it's the newest generation entering the workforce heavily, right? But um, it was true of like millennials and to a different extent, a bit of Gen X, right? Like the adoption is different, but also like the whole premise was that they don't want to call, and that's not true. But it is true that like there is more trepidation about these experiences, and I think there's a very clear, like provable point that says they're not. It's not about voice or not voice. There's a bit about the social anxiety of it, like do you want to speak to a human or not?
mm,
And it's almost like this tiredness of like, hello, good day, how are you? Da-da-da-da-dum. And I've always had this like very interesting it's like cultural differences, right? I've spent half my life in the UK, but I feel like maybe Serbian culture is a bit more transactional, direct, where I'm like, I'll send someone a message in the morning, hey, where was that thing? Da-da-da. And like from Brits in particular, who are really big on manners and they're the well, of the peoples I've interacted with at scale, they're definitely the most polite. Uh, the answer would often be from people who are like a bit shaken by like, oh, they'll be like, "Good morning, how are you?" I was
Yeah.
like, "Sorry, no, no, I didn't want to chit chat. I just wanted that, right?" And I think that was like always really interesting. And I was on a call with a bunch of Serbian clients for once, which is not very frequent. And I think two Brits on the call with me were just like, someone started sharing the screen and talking. I was like, you see, this is like a feature, not a bug. I'm not the only one. But what was interesting is like I get to do that with voice with an AI in a way that's like a bit like on the phone. Oh, how are you this? And obviously I've been like anglicized partially, and I've learned to, go through that like trivial bit in the conversation, but you don't have to, right? And then
Yeah.
it's just really fast and it's like sport mode, like back and forth, like real quick. I think that's really for those that want it, they can have it. But equally, I think there's a bunch of people who really appreciate the softer side of just like being able to chit chat and stuff. And what's funny is that they want to do that with a bot as well, even though they're not really getting that emotional exchange with another human being.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really what you're talking about here are like interesting accessibility considerations. And it's funny because this is something that I remember like in my first week at the company, over 3 years ago or whatever, was talking about, and was getting kind of laughs in response to like, oh, you want to design like more accessible conversation styles and like more adaptable conversation styles. But like actually like this thing goes beyond like there's the sort of cultural differences you're talking about and like the different ways that people like to interact. And one advantage that LLMs and computational systems have over people is that they don't have these ingrained personalities. Like they can sort of flip and switch between what the preferences are. And sort of as you said, there are going to be people who, and the research continually shows this, that even if they know it's a robot, they're going to assign it, human characteristics like
Right.
wanting to do small talk, wanting to be respected, wanting to have polite interaction. And we're certainly seeing that with ChatGPT too, about with all these stories in the news of like people falling in love with their voice assistants and like despite knowing full well that it's not a person on the other side, like we can't help but assume this intentional stance with respect to these systems. We can't help but
I
assume.
mean, look at the reaction at like 4.0 being pulled. It's like bring her back, bring
Yeah.
her back. It's just like, like the thing is the first time yesterday that I saw like someone been posting something without it being like everything just about 4.0 and like how they like changed it from away from like what they gotten used to. And um it's insane. It's kind of like, yeah, the I think we're not done seeing the interesting effects of it, and we'll see what society will look like in 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, on that awesome note, thank you for joining me today. Always a
Thanks for having
pleasure.
me. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, and to everyone watching, please share, like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.